Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar presentation, 4 testing methods to scale and automate your DevOps pipeline, brought to you by Perfecto. I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. Our first presenter is Eran Kinsbruner. Eran is the Chief Evangelist at Perfecto and the author of the Digital Quality Handbook and Continuous Testing for DevOps Professionals. As a monthly columnist at the Enterprisers Project. He is a software engineering professional with nearly 20 years of experience at companies such as Matrix, Sun Microsystems, General Electric, Texas Instruments, and Newstar. He holds various industry certifications from ISTQB, CMMI, and others. Our next presenter is Nico Kruger. Nico is a director of global sales engineering at Perforce. He specializes in technical guidance and product development efficiency for global organizations. With an engineering and development background, he is dedicated to helping bridge the gap between customers and the product teams to deliver quality products.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, as mentioned, my name is Eran Kinsbruner and I represent Perfecto, which is a Perforce company, and I'm here with Nico to talk to you about the testing methods that we believe will help you scale and automate your entire DevOps pipeline. And to do so, we believe that you need to go through the following agenda items. First, you want to make sure that you are matching your test automation framework with the right persona, and the persona is not just the individual, it's also about the objective this individual has and his skill set. Second, you want to make sure that you are scaling the entire requirements across the DevOps pipeline, and we'll address that as well in this webinar. Next, we also want to see how we can optimize the entire testing activities within the pipeline. And as we learned today, it's becoming quite difficult. And this is where things like machine learning are becoming well adopted as a technique or a method to help you scale and optimize your activities, your testing activities. Finally, we're going to look at dashboard and how they can be beneficial to the entire team that is involved in testing to make sure that actually they make sense of every testing artifact that is being produced during the pipeline. We're going to show, with the help of Nico as well, a nice demo flow, including the dashboard that comes afterward during the webinar. So with that, I would like to start, because we're talking, and this is the subject of this webinar about continuous testing, I just want to set the stage and make sure that we are all aligned on the definition, the way myself as well as Perfecto sees continuous testing. And I underscored, I would say, 4 words that in my mind represent the value behind continuous testing. And this is what you can actually learn from the test automation and what they actually provide back to you. So I'm looking at continuous testing as the process of executing the highest valuable test automation scenarios that can identify the business risk associated with your code changes. Okay, and when I'm talking about high value tests, I'm not talking about the entire test automation suite. And this is a pain point that I'm running into almost every day with clients and also with the market, with the practitioners. We're talking about continuous testing, and in this webinar, we're talking about scale, and scale is very important, but you need to be very careful at what you are actually scaling. And here, that's the main point here. You want to make sure that you identify only the highest valuable test automation scripts, the ones that are able to run without flakiness, that they can provide you the right value, that they are covering the right business flows. Otherwise, you're just adding too much noise and actually exhausting resources that in some cases you don't even have. So this, in my mind, is the important definition of continuous testing. And once you get that, I think everything else below that actually comes into play, because this is what defines the test automation scope, the platforms, the scenarios, what you want to achieve from a feedback perspective, what you are looking at from an objective from the test cases, and many more. So let's see who is involved, okay? Who is contributing to testing within the DevOps pipeline. And today we are looking at three main personas. We're talking about the developers, of course. We're looking at the SDETs, or the software developers in testing, and the business testers. All of these three personas contribute to some extent to the overall testing activities. Some are manual testing activities, some are functional testing and non-functional, and some are just build acceptance or unit testing that often are held or owned by the developers. So how can you find the balance between these three? Because the pipeline is unstable in most cases when you do not have the right balance between the tools and the personas that are listed in this slide, and B, when some are actually taking too much on themselves from a test automation perspective and leaving the others to cope with manual testing. And this is where, you know, the unbalanced approach or reality impacts the entire test automation coverage and success. The way to optimize or to look into a proper and modern test automation strategy is to kind of share the load between the three personas, looking at the developers and the SDET that can pick the most high valuable, going back to the definition of continuous testing. This guy should focus on the code-based testing activities, focusing on the high value test automation scenarios, the ones that are very predictable, the ones that are very stable across platforms and within the CI, and then exclude the ones that are flaky, hard to automate, or are too timely consuming to either develop or maintain. These cases where when they are being excluded from this bucket can be transitioned to the business testers that can use low code or no code tools like Cucumber or codeless solution, 100% codeless solution, to help boost the overall test automation coverage, as well as balance the different practitioner load within each software iteration. Because you need to remember that this balanced approach is not for one software release. It's not for one iteration. We are looking at mature DevOps organizations which are aiming to release on a weekly basis, or sometimes, you know, upon each code change. You cannot really put the entire load on only a software test automation engineer and in some cases the developers. You need to have a more balanced approach where everyone can share the load, everyone can contribute. And oh, by the way, when you have more personas with different skill sets, you're getting more creative test creation scenarios and also more eyes to look from an exploratory perspective into the entire business flows. So you're actually having here a win-win approach for the entire process. Before I dive into this high-level comparison, which can actually show the previous slide, you know, in reality, in action, let's just go back to this slide. Nico, do you see, you know, this unbalanced or balanced approach also in your, you know, daily engagement? You're meeting customers on a daily basis. You're coming from an ALM background as well. What's your take on this model?
I mean, absolutely. It's, you know, one of the things we often look at is what makes a difference when we speak to customers and they, you know, look at our solutions, which ones end up being very, very successful and which ones often struggle. And I think it's very important to get the balance right, you know, match what it is and how you can test to the skill sets you've got, and use, you know, the technologies, the frameworks that are right for you, and don't try to go down a specific path, which, you know, it may just end up in failure because you just aren't ready. You don't have the skill sets to match that areas. But you know, the people that do it the best keep it simple, and they have testing is part of a whole process, right? So from an engineering perspective, from a business perspective, and so on. So it's really, making sure all of these personas work together, and each part of them will contribute to make it more successful.
Awesome. And Nico, when we look at this slide, actually, you can actually see how for one project, and by the way, when I'm looking into advanced and mature organization today, I cannot see or couldn't find even one organization that told me that, yeah, I'm only using Selenium or I'm only using this technology for my entire end-to-end testing activities. In today's reality, when you have so many options available, and by the way, each and every option serves a different purpose, a different objective. So we see more and more organizations actually picking and matching these solutions to the personas, making the test automation coverage as broad as possible, as wide as possible towards the business risks identification. And if not to look at each and every line in this table, you can just look at one or two examples. So you look at Selenium and Appium. Okay, Selenium and Appium are very code-based driven test automation frameworks. They support the majority of the development languages, ranging from Java through C#, Python, JavaScript, and Ruby. Right? They support all of the platforms. These are cross-platform test automation frameworks. They have plenty of integrations. They have a very mature community behind them with robust documentation and best practices and code samples, and you name it, right? But the most important thing to learn here is that they require coding skills, okay? They are matching mostly the SDET persona within the organization. You won't see that many developers inheriting this framework. Again, I'm not making any general statement here, but you want to look at what the developers versus the test automation engineers are trying to achieve, okay? When you want to compare between the Selenium and Appium of the world and the next row, which is XUI test and Espresso for the mobile or headless browsers on the web front, you see that these are serving different objectives, okay? Well, they do fit perfectly into the CI/CD pipeline. They are very, very platform specific, okay? XUI test is only iOS. Espresso is only Android. Headless is supporting mostly Chrome, okay? Chrome browser, mostly the Puppeteer solution from Google. You will see some other, but they are not as mature. And this is where a software developer automation in testing will find these frameworks good but not perfect, because software test automation would like to look at the whole picture. It wants to look at the cross-platform quality perspective. It wants to understand from a coverage perspective how a specific scenario works across, this iOS, this Android, this tablet, and by the way, this browser, if we're looking at a responsive web. Not all of these solutions can serve cross-platform agendas, okay? And by the way, these frameworks are very embedded in the IDEs, as XUI test is an overlay on top of Xcode running on a Mac. Espresso supports or is supported on top of the Android Studio IDE. These are I would say, the environment mostly the developers work in. You will see that the SDETs are mostly on the code base, working with IntelliJ, some are working with Eclipse, etc. The next two rows here are looking at the lower skilled engineers or testers, ranging from codeless tools, which are 100% codeless. You don't need to write even one line in Java or other development language to get an end-to-end scenario running through record and playback. BDD, on the other case, is a mix and match, okay? To do BDD successfully today, you need to have a mix between business testers and SDETs or developers, okay? So look at this column, and if you look at this table or this column, and now going back to this slide, this is a reality of this model, in action. And think about your own organization today and see, if you have Selenium, Appium, Espresso, or if you're operating in a BDD, it's most likely that you have these different skills available within the organization. You just need to make sure that A, you are matching the skills to the right solution, and B, that you're empowering collaboration between these different personas towards the same goal, so you do not also have too many duplicates. Each and every one fills the gap that is required from a code coverage and test coverage perspective. So when you're looking at selecting test automation frameworks or techniques, and I think that the previous table kind of emphasized most of what you see right now on the screen. These are the 6 main, in my mind, consideration. And Nico, feel free to chime in and give your take from your wide experience in the market. But I was looking at the community and the support behind the tools. I was looking at the fitness to the SDLC process, the reporting, the test automation coverage abilities a test framework can give, the scaling of test automation, and also the robustness. Anything that comes into mind, maybe in addition, or something that you think is more important than others here from your end, Nico?
I think the first criteria, as you mentioned, is, like we had in the previous slide, is pick the things that will help you be successful, meaning the technologies your teams can work with, match to their skill set. And so I think, what we've seen in the market is sometimes, people pick the wrong technologies, they pick the wrong frameworks, and often it's just they haven't been through the process of running test automation successfully. And then, as you go down this process, later on, you will get the results of not matching technically to what you can do or to your team skills by having lots and lots of failures. And so you've really got to look at a framework with great community support that fits into the way you work. If you're a Java shop, if you're a Microsoft.NET shop, whatever the type of technology is, make sure that you match those to what you use today to help you be successful, and also ensure that it feeds back to that loop. And I think, Eran, you hit it on the head there. It's making sure that value comes back in the DevOps loop. As you're testing, that feedback, be it from mobile, be it from web, has to be coming back really efficiently. And when we start to do this at scale, that's often, as you mentioned, where the stuff just breaks down. So I absolutely agree with that.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Nico. So let's just do a stop for 1 second for a live demo, and I'll just turn it back to you, Nico.
Perfect.
Let's see when we can see your screen. And while the screen is loading, what Nico is going to demonstrate is how you can actually take, the last row in the previous table that shows the collaboration between different practitioners, which is based on BDD, and take it to the next level across different platforms, again, all in a cloud-based environment.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Eran. Just to make sure you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Perfect. So I've got the Perfecto platform open. And for the purpose of today, we're not going to show you the whole platform. We're really going to focus, as Eran mentioned, is how do I do this at scale? And so one of the first things we'll look at is, obviously you can do manual testing. There's the different roles, the different personas, skill sets. But when we want to start to scale this up, how do we actually do that? And so one of the methods you could do is by using BDD and using frameworks that allow you to scale. So I'm going to go to the Perfecto live stream to look at a couple of tests running in the background. And what I'm going to show you is what happens if we start to want to run this at scale. So the first thing I'm going to switch to my IntelliJ IDE. Now, the IDE is not that important. You can use whatever you feel most comfortable with. But what I want to showcase is a method to run this at scale and how the best cloud platforms, specifically on test automation, can help you achieve that, because you need something that's robust, reliable, that can execute this at scale. So what I've got here is a project where I'm using BDD, which is an approach to testing. So this really is the approach to writing my test. It's really in plain English. So really, it depends on the skill set you're matching. You can have those individuals use it on a day-to-day basis. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to write the test. In this scenario, I'm going to log in and start to add an expense. Now, the way I'm going to do this, I'm actually going to execute this same test against both mobile devices as well as web browsers for multiple platforms. And that is the key. It's taking a single test and running it at the same time in parallel against multiple devices. So the way we're doing is we're utilizing TestNG as our method to do this. So there you can see I've set up multiple tests here, one for iOS, Android, and so on. Let's go ahead and hit the run button. And what's going to happen right now is I'm going to go ahead and run my expense tracker solution over here, and the tests will start. And as you will see at the bottom left-hand side of your screen, the tests will start to fire off in parallel. Now, if we go to the live stream over here, we will instantly see all these tests starting to execute at the same time at scale. And this is critical. This is where you can start to take your testing instead of an hour for each of the different operating systems or platforms you need to test. You can start to execute these at just a tremendous scale at the same time. So if you think back of my IDE where I had my test set up, as you can see, the multiple tests are firing at the same time. What's happening right now? We're testing on an iPhone 6, Samsung Galaxy. We're testing on a Microsoft Windows 10, Chrome version 78. And with the ability to do this, it allows that plain English test, which is in the BDD language, to execute with just one script. Right, and I'm running this in parallel. Now, I'm doing a couple of advanced features as well with this type of approach with things like Touch ID, but all of those actions I can automate instantly. And as this is running, what's going to happen is, and then Ron will show this a bit later on, is what's happening to this data, how are we working with it and reporting back on it. And one of the things, the platform needs to do for you is to help you understand where these problems occur, what's happening to them, and why are they failing. And so I'm going to take an example here of, for example, 3 of these or 4 of these tests, and I'm going to compare them. So again, the same test running on multiple devices, and I can actually go into that device and look at the steps as they execute it. And you can see over there, it was finding the location, clicking on items, I can watch a video, I can report my bugs. But this is a great way to start to compare how these tests, the same test actually works on multiple devices. And if you go back to our IDE, you can see it's executing, it's shutting down, it's actually completed quite a few of my tests. But again, it's a great and easy way to do this at scale. And I think, Ron, as you've seen and I've seen, this is what a lot of our customers come to us looking for. This type of approach is executing these tests at scale at the same time. So really running them at parallel and having or needing a platform that can help you burst or execute these things in a timely fashion.
Definitely, Nico, and just one comment. So, well, you didn't mention, and we'll talk about the reporting, but even just the TestNG setup that you just shown, just setting up such an environment that includes so many platforms to run in parallel. In many cases, when I'm running into it's a two-way problem. The first one is not in many cases the teams don't have the access to so many platforms to execute in parallel, and B, it takes them too much time to make sure that these platforms are stable enough, are up to date, and so forth. So with a click of a button, you just triggered one single test to run on 5, 6 different platforms, iOS, Android, desktop browsers that were all provided as a service in the cloud. So in that case, you're actually also solving the environment setup pain that is also a huge dependency and a problem in software testing today.
Absolutely, and this is an example of BDD as you mentioned, but of course, if for those that are more advanced, that are writing in various languages or platforms or frameworks, you could absolutely use them. But you're absolutely right. It's many testers we see today, they start some of these tests, but really, when they start to execute them, they run into tremendous problems just with the environments, device stability, and all those sorts of things. And as you want to run these tests at scale, not only are good tests and valuable tests important, but what is also valuable is to get the feedback of your CI/CD pipeline back to the teams, and that means you need a stable platform, right? Somewhere we can just rely on it to execute and run. And that's really what I think is very important. It's a combination of these things that are making these teams successful.
Yeah, totally.
Perfect. Well, I'll turn it back to you, Eran.
Sure. So let me just get full access back to the slides. Okay. So now that we've done a demo, we touched a bit about the matching between technology and personas. Let's see, okay, how we can take it to the next level. And what we see is that the scaling also depends on the maturity, okay? As mature as you are, definitely you can scale up and down, but also it depends on, you know, the right approach. If you go back to the two or three slides back, we talked about selecting the right test automation framework. If you didn't selected the tools that are the foundation for your test automation, obviously scaling it up and down as you need will be a problem. So when we are looking at scaling test automation throughout the pipeline, I'm looking at three main contributors that helps scaling it. The first one is the platform scalability. Okay, how is the lab able to support your needs? And Nico just finished his demonstration showing you that you can easily run in parallel across multiple platforms, web and mobile. Okay, if you do not have the connectivity to the right framework, and if you do not have the access to the platforms, just yesterday iOS 13.2 GA was released by Apple. This was the 5th release in less than a month since iOS 13 was launched back in September. So 5 iOS GA versions releases in 1 month. If you do not have the ability to A, support all of these incremental changes from Apple, and B, you do not have the access to all of these permutations, obviously your test automation value will decline, okay, will decrease, because you will not be testing on the latest and greatest environment. So this is one thing, the platform scalability and also the platforms being up to date. Second is the test suite scoping. And if you remember the definition of continuous testing, I was underscoring the high value, okay? To scale test automation, while it's a number, you want to scale as much as possible. You want to scale as much as possible of what's right, of what's giving you value. You need to be very smart about what tests are being included in your test automation suite, in your regression, in your build acceptance testing, in the CI, in monitoring when you're doing it in production, for your performance testing. It's all part of the continuous testing. We're not talking about just UI testing. We're talking about any kind of testing or testing activity that gives you value, from API through security, functional, non-functional, unit, and so forth. So the scoping and scoping it right is the second contributor to your scalability success. And lastly, it's the time. Time is the one thing that in most cases we do not have enough of. And this is where we need to be very, very, I would say, picky about going back to the second layer here, test suite scoping, because these two items are quite close. So you need to be very on top of things with regards to how much time each test scenario takes you to execute end-to-end, how much time the test environment setup takes you, how much time a build acceptance cycle takes you within the CI, and things like that. So you need to have the right measures and KPIs for all of the above, so you can actually be successful and you can actually know whether your scalability is becoming limited, and you need to do some corrective actions. So just to summarize, when you want to scale your test automation, assuming you selected the different test automation frameworks, you mixed and matched them to the right skill set and the personas, as mentioned earlier in the webinar. Now you want to make sure that these frameworks are running against the right lab with the right coverage, and the test cases are of high value within the time boundaries, okay? And if they are not, you can do sharding, you can do another elastic techniques that can help you, meet these timelines, but to do so, you need to have the visibility. Let's do a stop here and get, the voice from the attendees, from the audience, and launch the poll, and thank you for launching it right now. And what I'm interested to see, because I keep hearing, that there are many wastes within the DevOps pipeline, and there are a lot of time-consuming activities. I want to understand, as a market average, and you guys online are kind of a nice representative of the market. What's the most time-consuming testing activities within a test cycle? I have my own gut feeling of what will be the most time-consuming one. Nico, what do you think will be the top one?
I mean, yeah, a lot of this will depend, obviously how mature you are and where you are in your cycle. I mean, for a lot of teams that really get into test automation and are running lots of cycles, you're going to start to see a tremendous amount of noise, right? Let's say you've got everything right, just that what the scale of test execution will give you is great data, but lots of it, right? And so that is where I think, for lots of people, probably on today's webinar as well, is just that absolute noise you're going to see of things that pass for false positives. That's what I would bet my money on.
Awesome. Let's give a few more seconds, and if you can share the results from the audience. Let's see what the attendees.
Oh, we're pretty close.
Because I'm present, I cannot see the answers. So what was the top one? Share it with me.
So the top one, so actually the second one was test flakiness. We've gotten 38% your test environment setup. So that, obviously tells me we've got, lots of people that spend tremendous amount of time setting up these platforms, as you mentioned, right? The different browsers, different iOS platforms. The second one, of course, we had there the test flakiness. So just the noise from all the, potential false positives. And then we've got manual testing, so still a lot of manual testing happening. And of course, that'll contribute with the environment setup as well, because for every manual test, you've got to get a device potentially or the right environment. And then we've got the test cycle analysis, number 4 there.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I would actually, from my insights into the industry, I actually see, I would say probably number 2 in my list was actually test cycle analysis. I see a lot of practitioners spending so much time, money, and resources, on building a good test automation suite. But at the end of the day, what is the test automation suite if you cannot really properly analyze it? And it's a black box thing. You just click on a button or trigger it from the CI, and you get 1,000 test cases running for you across different platforms. This is fine, but this doesn't give you value. The value from test automation only starts from the test analysis, from the reports. This is where you engage back with the test results, with the test artifacts, and see what happened, okay? And you can make sense of that and get some data-driven decisions. So my gut feeling was initially that the test cycle analysis would be between number 1 or 2, actually, from a time consuming, because there are not really good tools out there. We will show what we have built within Perfecto in a few moments. But when you are working with Selenium and Appium and other open source frameworks, while they are very good in creation of test automation, they are not really providing good test analysis capabilities. So you can make, especially when you are scaling up large test suites, to make sense out of, and filter out noise and flakiness, and get, like you just showed in the demo, Nico, cross-platform comparison in a click of a button. You do not have that with the open source frameworks. So in my mind, this is also something that consumes a lot of time from practitioners. So with that, let's look at, we talked about the platform scalability, and we talked about the 3 layers. In my mind, and going back to the personas, this is how, in my mind, you need to scale, or actually successful organizations are scaling today the test automation activities, and they are dividing the priorities of the test cases by the personas across the different pipeline activities. So in the early development stages, this is where the scaling will be quite low. You see, you have 1 device, 2 devices, and few desktop browsers. And the trigger for doing testing, like unit testing here or build acceptance in the second thing, in most cases is either from the dev workstation, pair and post commit, code changes. Okay. In the build acceptance testing, you are trying to scale a bit up your platforms. Some organizations are actually scaling towards the top 10 platforms that they see from the analytics or the market. And once they're scaling it towards the 10, it's sometimes difficult to do it from the dev workstation. This is where they're doing it from the CI via a scheduler. And in most cases, they're actually shifting these activities also to the cloud, because scaling, 5, 10, 15, even 24, like we see here, it's almost impossible to do locally within a workstation or in-house. It's simply hard and inefficient, and also unstable in my mind. So this is a nice way to look at the different testing activities and types based on the scaling of platforms across the different life cycle of a build or software iteration, and seeing how you can prioritize the platforms, the testing, and also the triggering of the activity itself. To be successful, and this webinar actually builds one layer on top of the other. So up until now, we have seen matching of technologies to personas. We have seen how you can parallelize and scale testing across different technologies when you're matching the personas, right? We looked at BDD that requires collaboration between developers or SDETs and business testers. We then looked at how you can actually divide the different testing types within the pipeline. Now let's see, you want to make sure that you didn't rush too fast into things. You want to make sure that everything is stable. You need to put some metrics, okay? I gave a clue about the metrics in the few slides ago when I talked about the time, okay? The time element, how much time it takes you to execute a specific test or, a specific suite. Okay, let's be more specific and look at, the sizing, okay? Number of unique test cases across these different types, like I've shown in the previous slide. And by the way, you want to make sure, even though you are scaling up, that you are not really doing too many duplicates, okay? That you have right utilization of the platforms, of the test cases towards the business goals. Next, you want to be very minded to the time it takes to execute end-to-end each test case. And by the way, I hate the word best practice, but a very reliable and scalable test automation suite is such that consists of many test cases that last less than 3 minutes, 3-4 minutes tops. When you start seeing test cases that last 6, 7, and even more minutes, and there are many like this in the industry, this is when you start seeing noise, flakiness, instabilities within the pipeline. And why? Because in many cases, these test cases are carrying too much dependencies from one step to the next, or they are relying on a very robust setup of the environment up until you reach the business objective of the test case. So the first step to be successful is to make sure that you have these metrics. You're measuring, you're looking into your test analysis, your reports, and understanding what is the most time-consuming testing scenarios. Only then you can start analyzing and drilling down and see, okay, what's the root cause? These test cases are too lengthy. Because again, when you have these test cases that are too lengthy, they are delaying your entire CI build acceptance testing, they are delaying your release. Okay, and by the way, you need to maintain them as a constant activity from one software iteration to the next. So you want to make sure that you are very optimized in the way you carry on test cases between one software release to the next. You have other soft metrics that maybe are less measurable, but some of them are, by the way, if you do them right, you can measure them. But you want to make sure that you also carry some metrics and KPIs around defects history within platforms and unique features, test flakiness and inconsistency of a test versus a platform. And you can come with your own as well. But the main point of this slide is you need to, in order to scale and be successful in this scaling up, you need data, you need metrics, you need measurements, so you can have a continuous improvement roadmap. If you do not measure what you have today, or you do not have all the data in front of you, you will probably get some decisions wrong when you're ramping your entire DevOps activities in the future. Anything or comments from you, Nico, on metrics? Some recommended metrics that you maybe have seen in your daily engagement with clients?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we see is once people, have access to a cloud infrastructure that's stable and they can get to the devices or browsers if they need to, once you've solved that problem, the one thing you definitely have to be is very smart about how you start to analyze the data, right? Because, when you just start to throw tests on a platform and start to test them, it really starts out very well, but it means very little if you can't analyze what is really going on. So one of the things we're seeing people struggle with is, at the beginning it's great and they get a tremendous amount of data. It's then understanding what to actually do with that data. How do you analyze it, right? Quickly help me identify, are we having a problem with a specific device? Is it a specific operating system? Was there, like you mentioned, the iOS update that's causing us grief for all these specific iOS devices? So, one of the things we really see is, as soon as you start to get into them, it is actually getting to that next level of test automation, which is really analyzing and getting smarter, not only in the scale of what you execute, but taking what's being executed, understanding what's really the root cause of a problem, and then quickly fixing it. Because that's really, I think, the magic, right? Is getting that quick feedback, but having a tool and the ability to analyze what's going wrong. So, that's what we're seeing when we speak to customers really on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Nico. So once we acknowledge the scaling, the timing, and put some metrics on top of these, let's see, because doing all of these manually can be not just exhaustive, can be error prone, and in some cases almost impossible. Think about, we have customers who are executing few tens and thousands test cases a day. Okay, I will show you in a second a dashboard that shows over 1 million test cases in a month. There is no, human capability to analyze at such scale in a very short amount of time and get a decent decision or a smart decision without using something based on either machine learning or a smart algorithm. And this is where we start seeing key use cases in test automation and DevOps rising these days. Or actually, I would say 2019, in my mind, was a turning point in adoption of machine learning and AI within DevOps and testing in general. And when you look at the use cases, you look at recognizing objects, for reliable automation. Some of you online, when we talk to, when we ask in the poll question, what is consuming the largest amount of time from your testing activities? A lot of you mentioned the flakiness. And what is the root cause of flakiness today? In most cases, is the elements, the element locators, the object strategy that either is changing or was poorly set from the beginning. So we see a lot of machine learning tools and algorithms that are becoming part of tools. We have it within the Perfecto tool chain as well to simply correct or self-heal scripts in cases an object changed over the life cycle of the project. This is one thing that we see machine learning becoming widely adopted. The second one, again, and I think Nico was showing very briefly, we'll double click on that in a few moments, making a quality-related decisions based on data. We just mentioned, hundreds and thousands or even millions of executions a month. This is where the industry is going, okay? When you're looking at the digital landscape today, where you have so many mobile devices, so many desktop browser permutations, think about just one responsive website. Responsive website means that it should work fine across all different platforms, mobile and web. When you execute it on a nightly basis or on a weekly basis, and you're generating so many test data, you need something to filter out, to slice and dice the data for you so you can make a decision whether you're going towards the right direction, you have any significant issues that you need to address immediately, and so forth. Without such tools, in most cases, it will take you ages to analyze and make smart decisions. So the first one was the test cases, test creation itself, which is the object locator. The second one is at the end of the execution, which is the reporting. The third one is around trending, okay, identifying trends and patterns, so you will have a cross-team productivity success. And when I'm talking about trends, trends can be, you know, which build acceptance test cases in that case is the most successful over time, looking at test data as well, but from an historical standpoint, looking at platforms that are more stable than others, looking at individuals and seeing how many defects were corrected or identified by which test against which functional area. These kind of trends actually highlight both problems as well as productivity opportunities or successes. So this is the third thing that we are seeing machine learning becoming key within the testing domain as well as development. And finally is the low to no code development. This is where we see machine learning record and playback tools shining. We see plenty of tools. One of them was also recently launched from Perfecto and is ramping up. We see autonomous testing, which is the next level, and RPA tools, also leveraging things like AI and machine learning. So in my mind, this is like capturing all of these three into one tool in some case, but these are, in my mind, the 4A opportunities and B trends in machine learning that we see helping the testing practitioners, whether they are developers, SDETs, or business testers, to do their work much better. An example of, you know, how would look our like object identification weighting would look like when you are injecting machine learning algorithms. So from an history perspective, this is how from within Perfecto solution, a machine learning algorithm will scale or give you the right weight of a specific object within a page by looking at the entire DOM tree of the website and seeing all the different attributes. And we'll see that, you know, I would say this one, the size, this is the object property that got the highest ranking. This means that until something changed in the implementation in the website, the test automation script, whether it's code or codeless, will continuously use this object. Okay, if this declines and this becomes the top one, automatically the script will use the next object or the highest ranking object. This is something that only through machine learning with training and history and stuff like that can achieve. Okay, so this is just an example from the previous slide, but taken from reality. But let's look at specifics. Okay, some of you online talked about test environment setup. Some others talked about test automation, flakiness, and stability. This is real data, okay? From a research that Perfecto recently made, analyzing a lot of data from within its clouds, we found out that there are 4 main areas where customers and practitioners are failing to be successful in test automation. And these are the 4 categories. The first one is the scripts and the test automation frameworks related issues. And here you see different root cause analysis items. The top one is the objects, okay? When you're choosing the wrong object locator, this is where obviously your test automation will fail. Coding skill set, okay? When you're not implementing the script correctly, obviously, you know, over time it will fail. It will probably run for you once or twice locally. When you put it as part of a dependency or a sequence of other test cases, this is where, you know, it will fail. On the other front, you see backend issues like network and platform availability. You know, backend services, data validity. When you're looking to test against backend services and you don't have the proper production data or the proper data to work against, this is where you see other backend related issues causing test automation failures. Orchestration issues, not enough licenses, talking about the scale. You do not have the right scale within your team to cover everything that you want. You are targeting a test case on a platform that is already in use or got disconnected and you didn't check for that. Other lab-related issues. 10% of devices are causing 80% of the lab issues. You know, devices that got locked, the screen got locked, misconfigured, unstable by definition, or they have disconnected from the Wi-Fi or the cellular network. So these are the four things or the root causes that we see as main blockers, you know, in today's reality. These are real numbers, real facts that we've seen. So why am I showing you this slide? Because even if you are successful in all of these four today, it doesn't give you any, I would say, guarantee or immunity for the next software iteration. Everything around quality, I would say, is a moment in time. Today, everything works fine on a backend side and on the lab. The next software release, when you have a new iOS that you didn't update it, or someone changed some APIs, or someone changed other stuff, things will break. So the bottom line of this slide is the ability to get visibility into all of these four questions. At any given time, as an executive, as a manager, whether I'm managing a development team or a QA team, or I'm the DevOps lead, I need to know what's wrong with my scripts running from the CI or from any other triggered-based environment. I want to know what's wrong with my backend, why it's not up to date, why it's causing any issues. What's wrong with my lab? You know, you can have the most stable test automation assets on the left, but if the lab isn't stable or it's outdated, the value that you will get from your test activities will obviously be near zero. And finally, what's wrong with my executions? If you want to scale, you need to have the right elasticity. You want to have proper orchestration between you and the team, so you can actually be successful. So you want to have visibility into all of these issues. And to be on top of things and to have the visibility, this is where, and I've shown you one of the trends of having machine learning within the reporting. And in the execution, Nico showed you, he has shown you the dashboards. You know, you have seen the live stream and you have seen the CI dashboard that can show you which build takes too long and which build is flaky. But you know, look at the different root cause analysis. So if you look at the previous slide showing you, you know, pop-up handling, device in use. So pop-up handling is around test automation, authoring, and coding. This was the left most reason in the slide. Device in use is an orchestration example. Okay, multiple elements is another, an element not found are creation-related issues and stability that you can solve. Okay, if a device wasn't found or was disconnected, you will actually see another thing related to the lab as well. So this is, in my mind, a way to look at modern test automation scalability with the right level of visibility with root cause analysis. And this is what, you know, this is a snapshot from the Perfecto lab. But in my mind, this is where today's market needs to look at in order to be successful in test automation. It needs to get full visibility with high degree of root cause analysis visibility into issues, so it meets the strict timeline. With that, I just want to zoom into a large dashboard of one of our clients. And if you see here, 1.3 million test cases that were executed in less than 2 months. Okay, this was the scale here. And if you see many items here in one place. This is a single pane of glass for the entire practitioners with all the root cause issues, with history, as well as the different origin of the test automation. Some of the test cases were triggered by Espresso on the Android devices. Here, test cases were executed via Selenium codeless tools. Some were executed via Selenium on the web. Some test cases for iOS were executed using XUI tests. This is a reality. This is not a mock-up. This is a real client which scaled over 1.3 million test cases and using multiple technologies, but was able to examine and show them in one single dashboard to get, the real truth of its quality, activities. So you can see at any given time which frameworks, which platform, and which test cases specifically are adding value, which are flaky, which are taking too long, and so forth. You can see a lot of data here that can be useful. As mentioned, this is the same thing, but triggered and showing things from the CI, and you can see how good pipelines look like, but also, very poor build acceptance testing that only includes one test. By seeing that as an executive, I can take a decision. Why do I actually spend time on one test that actually slipped into the CI and actually is just failing, and I'm not doing anything about it? This is one way of optimizing and boosting productivity by just looking at the data. With that, and we're close to closing this webinar, I just want to summarize this webinar by giving you guys, I started the webinar with the definition of continuous testing. I would just want to conclude it with the 4 pillars of success. The 4 pillars of success for continuous testing at scale lies on 4 things. First one is having the right creation infrastructure or strategy that matches between technologies, skill set, and personas. Second, you want to have the right orchestration within the framework so you can scale your test execution. Next, you want to have everything that is coming from the creation and execution running in a very robust lab, most likely in a cloud that can scale, that can provide you as much degree of availability as possible with all the supporting environment functions. And lastly, we want to look at the analysis, and I've shown you in the previous slides how a good analysis dashboard can be the difference between being productive and successful, between spending too much time or wasting too much time on chasing false negatives and stuff like that. With that, and due to the time constraint, let's see if we can squeeze a few questions in the very short amount of time that we have left.
Great, thank you so much, Eran. We do have a few questions that have come in. The first question that we have is, what are your suggestions in making test automation start earlier in the process, in opposed to QA waiting on dev to release their next build?
Yeah, I can grab that one, Eran. I think that's a question a lot of people ask these days. And if you look at the advent of Agile and a lot of the shift left test movement, there's various methods you could use to actually start to do that. I think the most important thing is that early understanding of what it is we're building and get the team involved early. So QA shouldn't be a separate silo, shouldn't be a place where they'll wait for the test. They need to be part of the process of designing whatever feature or functionality is you're working on, so that they can actually start to develop the tests as the coding has happened. Now, often with automation, you do need something physical to write against, but again, there are approaches to make the testing team part of that story completion or done status, so they can ensure that the QA gets involved to get at least some part of the automation written earlier versus waiting for it to come over the wall and run it. So I would definitely look at those techniques to bring the QA as part of the engineering team as well as the design team.
Awesome.
Great. We do have another question. The next question is, how would you select the right test framework for your teams in a DevOps process to match the entire team?
Okay, so and actually it's a good question, and the slide with the 1.3 million cases, I think, kind of addresses at least my point of view on that. And in my mind, there is no one, especially today in the digital reality, you do not have only one framework that can serve every single persona based on the skill set as well as the objective he has. So the selection, and we looked at 6 different ways of considering a test automation framework from the community side, from the matching to the SDLC and skill set perspective, from the reporting and the ability to scale through this test automation framework. So the bottom line, because I think we provided good content around this question in this webinar, is simply see who are the resources that are going to use the test automation solution, then look at their skill set and the objectives, whether they want to cover functional or non-functional or security or accessibility or other layer of testing, and then make sure that you're matching the framework to their skill set, keeping in mind that in many cases, you probably would need more than one framework for few individuals, because the skill set and the objectives vary between each project.
Awesome, and that does look like all the time we have. So Eran and Nico, I'd like to thank you for the presentation today. I'd also like to thank today's sponsor, Perfecto, for providing the audience with a great webinar presentation. And lastly, thank you to everyone who attended today. We hope you learned something new that'll help you further your career. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.